The server room hummed like a mechanical heartbeat at midnight, fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across rows of blinking equipment. I wiped sweat from my forehead as I finished rebooting the city's main database server, another critical emergency that could have waited until morning if the mayor's office hadn't panicked over a frozen email system. My name is Reid, 33 years old, and I've been the municipal IT administrator for this Rust Belt city for 8 years. It's not glamorous work, but it pays the bills and keeps me busy enough to avoid thinking about how my marriage has been slowly fading like an old hard drive. My phone buzzed against my hip. The caller ID showed my sister Maddie's name, and something about the late hour made my stomach clench. "Reid, thank God you answered." Maddie's voice was tight with urgency. "You need to get over to Mom's anniversary party right now." "What? I thought that was next weekend." "It's tonight, and Jessa's here." She paused, and I could hear party noise in the background, laughter, music, the clink of glasses. "Reid, she's not alone." My wife Jessa had told me she was working late at the HR office, reviewing employee files for Monday's meeting. She'd been doing that a lot lately. Working late, attending sudden social events, always with a perfectly reasonable explanation that left no room for argument. "What do you mean she's not alone? Just get here, now. Trust me on this." The line went silent. I stared at my phone for a long moment, then grabbed my jacket. The server room door locked behind me with an electronic beep that sounded final. Mom's house sat in the older part of town, a 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch that had seen better decades. Cars lined both sides of the street, and warm light spilled from every window. I could hear music and voices as I walked up the front steps, my work boots heavy on the wooden boards. I pushed through the front door without knocking, family privilege, and immediately spotted Maddie near the kitchen. She caught my eye and nodded toward the living room, her expression grim. That's when I saw them. Jessa stood in the center of the makeshift dance floor, her arms wrapped around a man I recognized as Liam Mallory, local real estate hotshot, divorced twice, known around town for his expensive suits and expensive women. She was pressed against him like they were slow dancing to their own private song, completely oblivious to the dozen family members watching in uncomfortable silence. My wife of 4 years, the woman who complained about my boring IT job and my lack of social ambition, was grinding against another man at my mother's anniversary party while wearing the red dress I'd bought her for our last wedding anniversary. The music seemed to fade as I stood there, frozen in the doorway like a crashed computer waiting for someone to hit the reset button. Aunt Carol noticed me first, her face going pale. Then Uncle Frank. One by one, heads turned in my direction until the only people who hadn't noticed my arrival were Jessa and her dance partner. "Reid!" Mom's voice cut through the awkward silence. "I didn't know you were coming." Jessa's head snapped up. For a split second, I saw pure panic flash across her face before she stepped back from Liam, smoothing down her dress and putting on that bright smile she used for difficult customers at work. "Honey, you made it." She walked toward me with practiced casualness, as if she hadn't just been wrapped around another man like plastic wrap. "I thought you were working late." "I was." My voice sounded strange in my own ears, flat, mechanical. "Server emergency." "Well, you're here now." She reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. "This is such a nice surprise. Mom's party is wonderful, isn't it?" I looked around the room at my family's faces, some sympathetic, some embarrassed, all of them clearly aware that they'd witnessed something they weren't supposed to see. Liam had retreated to the bar, suddenly very interested in his drink. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Wonderful." Jessa's smile faltered slightly. "Reid, are you okay? You look—" "I'm fine." I turned to my mother, who was wringing her hands near the piano. "Happy anniversary, Mom. Sorry I'm late." "Oh, sweetheart, you don't need to—" "I should go. Early morning tomorrow." I looked back at Jessa, who was watching me with those calculating eyes I'd been seeing more often lately. You staying? Well, I could stay. Enjoy the party. I walked out without another word, leaving behind the uncomfortable silence and my wife's stammered excuses. The cool night air hit my face like a slap, and I realized my hands were shaking. Back in my car, I sat in the darkness for several minutes, listening to the muffled sounds of the party continuing inside. Through the living room window, I could see Jessa talking animatedly to my cousin Sarah, her hands moving in the gestures she used when she was explaining something important, probably crafting her story for later. My phone buzzed with a text from her. Heading home soon. Love you. I started the engine and drove home to our small house on Maple Street, the one we'd bought together 3 years ago when we still talked about having kids and growing old together. Now it felt like a museum of a relationship that had ended quietly, without either of us ever naming it. Inside, I walked straight to my home office and fired up my personal laptop. If 8 years in IT had taught me anything, it was that information was power and documentation was everything. I opened a new folder and labeled it Evidence. Then I started typing. The next morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. Jessa had come home around midnight, slipping into bed with whispered apologies about losing track of time and promises to explain everything tomorrow. I'd pretended to be asleep, listening to her breathing settle into the rhythm of someone without a guilty conscience. Now she stood at the kitchen counter in her bathrobe, making coffee with the same efficient movements she used for everything else in her life. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and without makeup, she looked younger, more like the woman I'd married than the polished professional she'd become. "Good morning," she said without turning around. "You left so early last night, I barely got to talk to you." "I saw enough." She turned then, coffee mug in hand, her expression carefully neutral. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You tell me, Jessa. You were there." For a moment, I thought she might actually tell the truth. Something flickered in her eyes, guilt, maybe, or fear. But then her professional mask slipped back into place, the same one she wore when dealing with difficult employees at the city's Human Resources Department. "If you're upset about me dancing with Liam, that's silly. It was just a party, Reid. People dance at parties. Is that what you call it? What else would I call it?" Her voice took on that edge of irritation she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "You're making this into something it's not." I poured my own coffee, taking my time with the cream and sugar while I chose my words carefully. "How long have you been seeing him?" "I'm not seeing him." "God, Reid, you're being paranoid." "Am I?" "Yes." She set down her mug harder than necessary. "Liam is a client. He's buying property through the city's development program. I've had to work with him on the paperwork. That's all. It was a good story. Plausible, professional, with just enough detail to sound believable. If I hadn't seen them together last night, I might have bought it." "A client." "Yes. Who you slow dance with at family parties." "It was one dance, Reid. One dance at a party where I'd had a couple of drinks. You're acting like I committed adultery on the living room floor." The word hung between us like a challenge. Adultery. She'd said it first, not me. "I need to get to work," I said finally. "Reid, wait." She reached for my arm as I passed, her fingers cool against my skin. "I know how it looked, but I swear to you, it's not what you think. I love you. You know that, right?" I looked down at her hand on my arm, at the wedding ring that matched mine, at the face I'd kissed goodbye 1,000 times before. "Do I?" Something shifted in her expression then, a hardness I'd been seeing more often lately. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but this jealousy thing isn't attractive. Neither is grinding on other men at family parties." "I wasn't grinding." She stopped herself, took a breath, reset her approach. "Look, we're both tired. Let's talk about this tonight, okay? When we've both had time to think." I nodded and left for work, but I wasn't planning to think. I was planning to investigate. The city building housed multiple departments across 4 floors, with IT occupying a basement level that most employees forgot existed. It was perfect for my purposes, isolated, secure, and equipped with enough computing power to dig into whatever I needed to find. I started with the obvious stuff. Jessa's work computer was on the city network, which meant I had administrative access to her files, emails, and browsing history. Normally, I'd never violate that trust, but Normal had gone last night on my mother's dance floor. Her email revealed nothing suspicious: standard HR correspondence, meeting schedules, policy updates. But her browser history told a different story. Multiple searches for Liam Mallory real estate, visits to his company website, and several hits on restaurant review sites for places I'd never taken her. I dug deeper, pulling up her phone records from the city's cellular plan. Jessa's work phone showed regular calls to a number I didn't recognize, always during lunch hours or after 5 p.m. A reverse lookup revealed it belonged to Mallory Properties. But the real breakthrough came when I accessed the city's security camera system. Our building had cameras in all the public areas, including the parking garage. I pulled up footage from the past month, focusing on times when Jessa claimed to be working late. What I found made my stomach drop. 3 weeks ago, Jessa leaving the building at 5:30 p.m., not 8 p.m. as she'd told me. 2 weeks ago, Jessa in the parking garage with Liam Mallory, standing close enough to share breath while they talked. 1 week ago, the same thing, but this time he had his hand on her lower back in a gesture that was anything but professional. I saved everything to an encrypted drive, my hands moving automatically while my brain tried to process what I was seeing. 4 years of marriage, and she was throwing it away for a real estate developer with a reputation for collecting women like properties. My desk phone rang, jarring me back to reality. "Reid, it's Maddie. How are you doing?" "Been better." "I was afraid of that. Listen, I'm sorry you had to see that last night. I debated whether to call you, but I figured you deserved to know. How long do you think it's been going on?" Silence on the other end, then a sigh. "Honestly, Sarah said she saw them together at Murphy's bar 2 weeks ago, and Mom mentioned that Jessa's been asking a lot of questions about family events lately. When they are, who's going to be there? Checking to see if I'd show up. That's what I'm thinking." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling tiles. "She's denying everything. Says it was just one dance, that he's a work client." "And you believe her?" "I believe the security footage showing them together in our parking garage." "Jesus, Reid, I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be ready." "Ready for what?" I looked at the evidence files on my screen. Photos, videos, phone records, timestamps. A complete digital paper trail of my wife's betrayal. For me to stop being the nice guy. That evening, I arrived home to find Jessa in the kitchen, preparing what looked like an elaborate dinner. Candles flickered on the dining room table, and I could smell her expensive perfume from the doorway. The same perfume I'd been noticing more often lately, always on nights when she claimed to be working late. "Perfect timing," she said, turning to greet me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I made your favorite, chicken parmesan. Special occasion? Can a wife cook for her husband?" She moved toward me, rising on her toes to kiss my cheek. "I thought we could talk about last night. Clear the air." I sat down at the table, noting the wine she'd already poured, a bottle we'd been saving for our anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Okay, let's talk." She settled across from me, her hands folded on the table like she was conducting a performance review. "I know you were upset about seeing me with Liam, and I understand why. It probably looked inappropriate." "Probably. But I need you to trust me, Reid. Our marriage is more important than some silly misunderstanding." I took a sip of wine, studying her face in the candlelight. She was beautiful. I'd always known that. But tonight, I could see the calculation behind her expressions, the careful way she chose each word. Tell me about the phone calls. Her composure slipped for just a moment. What phone calls? To Liam's office, every day for the past 3 weeks. I told you he's a client. There's paperwork involved in the property development program. That requires daily phone calls? Sometimes. Her voice was getting tighter. Reid, I don't like what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking direct questions. She stood up abruptly, moving to the kitchen counter with her back to me. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You've decided I'm guilty of something, and now you're interrogating me like a criminal. Are you guilty of something? No. She spun around, and for the first time since I'd known her, Jessa looked genuinely rattled. I'm guilty of being friendly with a client. I'm guilty of having a couple of drinks at a party. That's it. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery, where I'd saved screenshots from the security footage. Then explain this. I showed her the image of herself and Liam in the parking garage, his hand on her back, both of them leaning in like lovers sharing secrets. The color drained from her face. You've been spying on me? I've been looking for the truth. By violating my privacy? By stalking me? By using the security cameras in a public parking garage to verify what my own wife tells me. She stared at the photo for a long moment, then sank back into her chair. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with tears that might have been genuine. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. He's been pressuring me, making things difficult at work. It was a new story, and I had to give her credit for the quick pivot. Pressuring you how? He knows people, important people. He's been implying that if I'm not friendly, he could make problems for me with the city council. So, you've been having an affair to protect your job? I haven't been having an affair. The tears were flowing now, and she wiped them away with angry gestures. I've been trying to manage a difficult situation without involving you because I knew you'd react exactly like this. Like what? Like a jealous husband who doesn't trust his wife. I stood up, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You want to know what I don't trust, Jessa? I don't trust the woman who lies about working late, then shows up on security cameras leaving early. I don't trust the woman who slow dances with her difficult client at family parties. And I sure as hell don't trust the woman who's been asking my family about my schedule so she knows when she can safely show up places with her boyfriend. Her mouth fell open. Who told you that? Does it matter? For a moment, we stared at each other across the ruins of our dinner, the candles flickering between us like fading hopes. I want him gone, I said finally. What? Liam Mallory. I want him out of your life. No more phone calls, no more meetings, no more dances. If he's really pressuring you, file a complaint with your supervisor. But I want him gone. She was quiet for so long, I thought she might actually agree. Then she shook her head. I can't do that. Why not? Because it's not that simple. You don't understand the politics involved, the relationships. Then help me understand. I can't. Those 2 words hung in the air like a confession. I can't. Not I won't, or you're being unreasonable. I can't. Because you're in love with him. She didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it either. She just sat there, tears streaming down her face, looking like a woman who'd been caught in a lie too big to explain away. I walked to the front closet and pulled out my jacket. Where are you going? To think. Reid, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, Can we? Because it seems like you've already made your choice. I left her sitting at the table with her elaborate dinner and expensive wine, crying into the candlelight. But as I drove away, I realized they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of someone who'd been caught. My phone buzzed with a text from her before I'd gone 2 blocks. I love you. Please don't give up on us. I deleted it without responding and kept driving. I ended up at Murphy's Bar, a dive on the east side of town that catered to city workers and blue-collar regulars, who appreciated cheap beer and minimal conversation. The bartender, Danny, had known me since high school and was smart enough not to ask questions when I ordered whiskey instead of my usual beer. "Rough day?" he asked, sliding the glass across the scarred wooden bar. "Rough year." I was halfway through my second drink when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my friend Mike Peterson, a detective with the city police department, and one of the few people who knew both me and Jessa well enough to have opinions about our marriage. "Hey Reid, heard you might be at Murphy's. News travels fast. Small town. Mind if I join you?" 20 minutes later, Mike slid onto the bar stool next to mine, still wearing his work clothes, khaki pants, and a button-down shirt that screamed plainclothes cop. He was a big guy, built like the college linebacker he'd been 15 years ago, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of steady presence that made people confess things they hadn't planned to share. "So," he said, after ordering his own beer, "want to talk about it?" "About what?" "About whatever's got you drinking whiskey on a Tuesday night." I considered lying, but Mike had interrogated enough people to spot deception from across the room. Instead, I told him everything: the party, the security footage, Jessa's evolving explanations, the phone calls to Liam's office. When I finished, Mike was quiet for a long moment, peeling the label off his beer bottle with methodical precision. "You know what you have to do," he said finally. "Enlighten me. Document everything. Get a lawyer. Protect your assets." "That's it? 4 years of marriage, and your advice is to lawyer up?" "My advice is to stop thinking like a husband and start thinking like a man whose wife is cheating on him." He turned to face me directly. "Reid, I've seen this before. The lies, the gaslighting, the elaborate explanations that don't quite add up. She's not going to suddenly develop a conscience and confess. Maybe if I... No." His voice was firm. "There's no maybe if I in this situation. She's made her choice. Now you need to make yours." I finished my whiskey, feeling the burn all the way down. "I keep thinking about the woman I married. She wasn't like this." People change, or maybe they just get better at hiding who they really are. My phone buzzed with another text from Jessa. "Please come home. We need to talk." Mike glanced at the screen. "You going to answer that?" "Not tonight." "Good. Let her sweat a little. In my experience, cheaters get real talkative when they think they're about to lose everything." I drove home around midnight to find every light in the house blazing. Jessa was waiting in the living room, still dressed in the same clothes from dinner, her makeup smeared from crying. "Thank God you're okay," she said, jumping up from the couch. "I was worried sick." "Were you?" "Of course I was. You just left, and then you wouldn't answer your phone. I needed space to think." "And? What did you decide?" I looked around our living room, at the photos of us on vacation, the furniture we'd picked out together, the life we'd built that was apparently worth less to her than whatever she had with Liam Mallory. I decided I want the truth. All of it. No more stories about work clients or professional pressure or difficult situations. Just the truth. She sank back onto the couch, her shoulders sagging. "What if the truth isn't what you want to hear? Then at least I'll know where I stand." For a moment I thought she was actually going to tell me. Her mouth opened, and she took a breath like someone about to jump off a cliff. Then her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, and I saw her face change, soften in a way it hadn't when she looked at me all evening. "Don't answer it," I said. "It might be important." "More important than this conversation?" She hesitated, the phone still ringing in her hand. Then she declined the call and set it aside. "You're right. This is more important." But the moment was gone. Whatever confession had been building faded with that phone call, and I could see her rebuilding her defenses in real time. "Reid, I know you don't believe me, but I need you to try. What you saw at the party, what you think you know, It's not the whole story. Then tell me the whole story. I can't. Because you're protecting him? Because I'm protecting us. It was the same circular logic she'd been using all evening, and I was tired of chasing my tail around it. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. Reid, please. Good night, Jessa. I left her in the living room and climbed the stairs to our spare bedroom, where I lay awake until dawn, listening to her move around downstairs and wondering when exactly my marriage had become a crime scene I was investigating. Outside, the first hints of sunrise were creeping through the blinds, and I realized I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I was no longer fighting for my marriage. I was building a case against it. The next few days passed in a strange, cold detente. Jessa and I moved around each other like polite strangers, sharing coffee and small talk while carefully avoiding anything that mattered. She stopped staying late at work, stopped taking mysterious phone calls, and made elaborate efforts to include me in her daily routine, texting me throughout the day, suggesting dinner plans, asking about my work with the kind of forced interest that felt worse than indifference. It was the behavior of someone trying to prove their innocence rather than someone who actually was innocent. Meanwhile, I continued my digital investigation. I'd installed monitoring software on our home router that tracked all internet activity, and what I found confirmed my worst suspicions. Late-night visits to Liam's social media profiles, searches for divorce attorneys, and most damning of all, visits to apartment rental websites. She was planning her exit strategy. On Friday evening, everything came to a head. I arrived home from work to find Jessa in the kitchen, preparing what looked like another peace-offering dinner. But this time, she wasn't alone. Sitting at our kitchen table, drinking coffee from my favorite mug, was her best friend Sarah Chen, a sharp-tongued attorney who'd never liked me and had never bothered to hide it. Reid, Sarah stood up with a smile that could have cut glass. Perfect timing. Jessa and I were just talking about you. I'm sure you were. Sarah stopped by to check on me, Jessa said, not meeting my eyes. I told her we've been having some difficulties. Is that what we're calling it? Sarah's smile widened. Jessa mentioned you've been going through her personal communications. That's a serious violation of privacy, Reid. In some states, it could even be considered stalking. I looked between the two women, Jessa nervous and fidgeting, Sarah confident and predatory, and realized I was being set up. This wasn't a friendly visit. It was an ambush. In some states, I said carefully, adultery is still grounds for divorce. Adultery, Sarah laughed. Is that what you think this is about? Reid, your wife danced with a man at a party. She took some business calls. If that's your definition of adultery, you might want to recalibrate your expectations. My expectations include honesty. Maybe that's old-fashioned. What's old-fashioned is assuming you have the right to monitor your wife's every move because you're feeling insecure. The word hit like a slap. Insecure. It was the same dismissive tone Jessa had been using all week, the implication that my concerns were rooted in personal inadequacy rather than legitimate evidence. You're right, I said, pulling out my phone. I am feeling insecure. Maybe this will help. I opened the photo gallery and showed them both the security footage screenshots, Jessa and Liam in the parking garage, their body language unmistakably intimate. Jessa's face went white. Sarah's expression didn't change, but I saw her eyes narrow as she calculated her next move. Where did you get these? Sarah asked. Public security cameras, which you accessed using your position with the city. That's abuse of authority, Reid. Possibly criminal. So is adultery. Prove it. Sarah stood up, moving to stand beside Jessa in a show of solidarity. Prove they're having an affair. Not flirting, not being friendly, not having a business relationship that makes you uncomfortable. Prove adultery. It was a lawyer's challenge, and we all knew it. I had suspicious behavior, intimate body language, and a pattern of deception, but I didn't have the smoking gun that would hold up in court. I don't need to prove anything to you. I said finally. No, but you'll need to prove it to a judge if you're planning to file for divorce on grounds of adultery. And based on what I've seen, you don't have a case. Jessa finally spoke up, her voice small and uncertain. Reid, I never wanted it to come to this. I've been trying to work things out to save our marriage. By lying to me? By protecting you from something you wouldn't understand. Try me. She looked at Sarah, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Liam and we have a history. From before I met you. When he came back to town and started working with the city, things got complicated. It was a new version of the story, and I had to admire her persistence. What kind of history? We dated, briefly, years ago. And you didn't think to mention this when he started calling you every day? Because I knew you'd react like this. Her voice rose, and for the first time all week she sounded genuinely emotional. I knew you'd assume the worst, just like you're doing now. So instead of being honest, you decided to sneak around with your ex-boyfriend and lie about it. I wasn't sneaking around. I was trying to handle a difficult situation professionally. By slow dancing with him at family parties? I made a mistake. One mistake, after weeks of stress and pressure, and you're ready to throw away 4 years of marriage. Sarah stepped forward again. Reid, I think you need to consider whether this is really about Jessa's behavior or about your own insecurities. Marriage counseling might be more appropriate than accusations and surveillance. I looked at both women, Sarah with her calculated sympathy, Jessa with her carefully crafted vulnerability, and realized I was outnumbered by professionals who were better at this game than I was. You're right, I said finally. I should probably talk to a lawyer. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Reid, Jessa said quickly, you don't need a lawyer. We can work this out ourselves. Can we? Because it feels like I'm the only one who wants to work anything out. You want to manage the situation. There's a difference. I walked toward the stairs, then turned back. Sarah, thanks for the legal advice. I'll be sure to pass it along to my attorney when I hire one tomorrow. Reid, wait. Jessa started after me, but I was already climbing the stairs. Good night, ladies. Don't let me interrupt your strategy session. I closed the guest room door behind me and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the urgent whispers drifting up from the kitchen. After about 20 minutes, I heard Sarah leave, followed by Jessa's footsteps on the stairs. She knocked softly on the guest room door. Reid, can we please talk? I think we've talked enough for one night. I'm sorry about Sarah. I didn't ask her to come over. She just showed up. It was probably true, but it didn't matter anymore. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was clearly fighting alone. Good night, Jessa. I love you, she said through the door, her voice breaking. I know you don't believe me, but I do love you. I didn't answer. Love was just a word, and words were all she had left. I hired a lawyer the next morning, Jennifer Walsh, a divorce attorney Mike had recommended with a reputation for being thorough and ruthless. Her office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, all dark wood and leather furniture that suggested both competence and expense. So, she said after I'd finished explaining the situation, what outcome are you looking for? I want out of the marriage, and I want to make sure she can't take me to the cleaners in the process. Understandable. Based on what you've told me, we have a case for divorce, though proving adultery might be challenging without more concrete evidence. What kind of evidence? Photos, videos, witness testimony, hotel records, credit card statements showing unexplained charges. The kind of documentation that proves physical intimacy, not just emotional involvement. I thought about the security footage, the phone records, the circumstantial evidence I'd been building. It was suggestive, but not conclusive. What if I could get that kind of evidence? Jennifer leaned back in her chair, studying me with the kind of careful attention lawyers reserved for clients who might be about to say something legally problematic. I would advise you to be very careful about how you obtain any additional evidence. Illegal surveillance, hacking, breaking and entering. Those activities could not only invalidate anything you find, but could also result in criminal charges against you. What about legal surveillance? Hiring a private investigator is perfectly legal, as long as they operate within the bounds of the law. It's also expensive. How expensive? She quoted a number that made me wince, but I nodded anyway. Do it. Reid, I want to make sure you understand what you're asking for. Once we start down this path, there's no going back. If the investigator finds what we think they're going to find, your marriage is over. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Jessa's tears, her protests of innocence, the woman I'd fallen in love with 4 years ago who might still be buried somewhere under all the lies and manipulation. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. The private investigator was a former police detective named Tom Bradley, who looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for the role, middle-aged, slightly rumpled, with the kind of forgettable face that was perfect for surveillance work. How long do you think this will take? I asked during our initial meeting. If they're as careless as you say they are? Not long. Cheaters get comfortable after a while. They start taking risks. He was right. Within a week, Tom had everything we needed. Photos of Jessa and Liam entering a downtown hotel together on Tuesday afternoon, when she told me she was in budget meetings. Video of them kissing in the parking lot of an upscale restaurant on Thursday evening, when she'd claimed to be having dinner with her mother. Credit card records showing charges at lingerie stores I'd never heard of, restaurants I'd never been to, and a weekend getaway to a bed and breakfast 2 hours away, a trip that had supposedly been a work conference. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and devastating. I'm sorry, Tom said as he handed over the final report. I know this isn't what you wanted to find. Actually, I said, surprised by how calm I felt, it's exactly what I wanted to find. Now I know. That evening, I arranged the photos on our dining room table like a deck of cards, then sat down to wait. Jessa arrived home at her usual time, calling out a cheerful greeting as she hung up her coat. Reid, I picked up Chinese food for dinner. Your favorite. She stopped in the doorway when she saw me sitting at the table, the photos spread out in front of me like evidence in a trial. What is this? The truth. She moved closer, her face going pale as she recognized herself in the images. There was no denying them, no explaining them away, no claiming they were taken out of context. Where did you get these? Does it matter? She sank into the chair across from me, her hands shaking as she picked up one of the photos, herself and Liam, in an intimate embrace outside the hotel. Reid, I can explain. No. I gathered up the photos and slid them into a manila envelope. You can't, and I don't want you to try. But if you'll just listen. I've listened to enough lies, Jessa. I'm done listening. For the first time since this whole thing started, she dropped the act completely. No tears, no protests, no elaborate explanations. Just exhausted resignation. What happens now? Now you pack your things and leave. Tonight. This is my house too. Not anymore. Check your email. My lawyer sent you the divorce papers an hour ago. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, and I watched her face as she read through Jennifer's carefully worded legal document. It was thorough, brutal, and ironclad. You're taking everything, she said quietly. I'm taking what's mine. The house is in my name. The savings account was funded by my salary. The car you've been driving is registered to me. I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. You can have whatever you brought into the marriage and whatever you bought with your own money. Reid, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. People do it all the time. People who want to work through it, yes. People who are honest about their mistakes and willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild trust. I looked down at her, this woman I'd loved and trusted and built a life with. You're not those people, Jessa. You're someone who lies, cheats, and then lies about lying and cheating. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, and the sound was harsh even to my own ears. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been telling me you still had feelings for your ex-boyfriend before you married me. Fair would have been asking for a divorce before you started sleeping with him. Fair would have been honesty at any point in the last 6 months. She stood up, and for a moment, I thought she might fight, argue, plead, make one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Instead, she just nodded. I'll pack tonight and stay at Sarah's. We can work out the details through the lawyers. Good. She started toward the stairs, then turned back. For what it's worth, I did love you. I do love you. No, I said quietly. You loved the idea of being married to me. You loved the stability, the house, the respectable life. But you never loved me enough to be honest with me. She didn't argue. She just climbed the stairs to pack up the remnants of our marriage while I sat at the dining room table, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal, and felt something that might have been peace. 2 hours later, she was gone. The house felt different immediately, emptier but also cleaner, like a fever had broken. I poured myself a whiskey and walked out onto the back porch, looking up at the stars and thinking about fresh starts and second chances and the difference between being alone and being lonely. My phone buzzed with a text from Mike. How did it go? I typed back, It's over. You okay? I considered the question seriously. Was I okay? My marriage was destroyed, my trust was shattered, and I was facing the prospect of rebuilding my life from scratch at 33 years old. Yeah, I typed back. I think I am. And for the first time in months, that was actually true. 3 months later, the divorce was final. Jessa had tried to contest the settlement, claiming she deserved half of everything despite the adultery evidence. But Jennifer had built an airtight case. In the end, Jessa walked away with her personal belongings, her car, and whatever money she'd managed to save from her own salary. I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved in with Liam, though apparently that relationship didn't survive the stress of being exposed. Last I heard, she'd taken a job with a company in another state and left town entirely. I kept the house, the savings, and most importantly, my self-respect. It took time to trust my own judgment again, to believe that not everyone was lying to me, to open myself up to the possibility of love without the constant fear of betrayal. But I got there eventually. The funny thing about betrayal is that it teaches you who you really are when everything you thought you knew turns out to be false. I learned that I was stronger than I'd given myself credit for, that I could survive having my heart broken, and that sometimes the end of something terrible is the beginning of something better.